You can go to North Carolina where they get 30% of their power from nuclear and it never goes off. Colorado has been hung up on nuclear weapons and uranium mining and all of that. So, yes, it does have baggage for sure. She's 100% right in that. But nuclear is completely enjoying a renaissance. And Colorado will be the last one to adopt it, probably.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's episode, we want to cover a couple of news articles that really caught our attention over the last week. The first of which comes to us from the Denver Post, and I just want to read the headline for folks. It says, "Is nuclear power becoming cool in Colorado? Discussion of a role for it is growing." And it talks about, obviously, the passage of House Bill 1040, which we covered so much, that reclassified nuclear as clean under state law. Talked about the news that the Denver airport was in early discussions about potentially siting a small modular reactor out there to help meet the airport's emissions goals while also providing around-the-clock power for, obviously, what's a real source of energy demand, one of the largest airports in the country. And then, too, it talks about the local business and labor leaders, folks like out in Pueblo that we've talked about so much that would like to see nuclear come there as a source of economic development and a replacement for existing power. So pretty interesting to see the Denver Post, which hasn't always even reported on nuclear and all the growing discussion that we've had in the state, talk about the fact that it looks like, at least to some people, nuclear is becoming cool in Colorado.
Yeah, well, it is cool. It is where the cool kids are hanging out. So I'll answer the question. The answer is yes. It is cool in and Colorado is being left behind because we have people in positions of authority who who don't like it, just flat out don't like it. Now, I will give Judith Kohler credit for covering it, but it's pretty clear she doesn't like it either. Um, I will say, and this is one of the things that we ran up against, and this is why we did the history paper. The history, Colorado's complicated relationship with nuclear power and uranium. She writes, how has nuclear power, with its baggage of radioactive waste and the 3 Mile Island partial meltdown, become a seriously considered option in today's fuel mix? Well, first of all, a lot of the people who support nuclear were born well after 3 Mile Island. And in fact, the only thing they know about 3 Mile Island is that Bill Gates, Microsoft and Constellation got together and they're going to reopen 3 Mile Island.
Right.
That's all they know about it. They didn't watch Jane Fonda and Michael Douglas in China syndrome. They didn't see any of that. Now, but that is why also though why we wrote that in that paper on or published the paper on Colorado's complicated, but it's a long relationship. And it's often been, Colorado has been hung up on nuclear weapons and uranium mining and all of that. So, yes, there it does have baggage for sure. She's 100% right in that. But is it cool? Is nuclear is completely enjoying a renaissance. And it isn't just, listen, Colorado will be the last one to adopt it, probably. I mean, even though we have passed it and we should be looking at it in every way, shape, and form, I don't think that's actually going to happen, unfortunately. What is interesting though is the fact that it took what, three times, third time's a charm. But we've been talking about it for a decade or more. And Alex Valdez, who was the Democrat representative, House rep from the Denver area, I think he's from the Denver area. I
Hmm.
think that's
Yep.
um, who was one of the co-sponsors. I love this. He went to France. He had a tour of nuclear facilities in France and said they get, it's 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear. Don't we want to be European? I mean, that's what everybody always says. Let's go be like the Europeans. Well, let's be French and let's have nuclear power. I would have said to Representative Valdez, you don't have to actually go all the way to France. You can go to North Carolina, where they get 30% of their power from nuclear, and it never goes off. It is the actual workhorse of Duke Energy's portfolio in North Carolina. It is just the way you like electricity. It's a flat line. It's always stable. It's always there. But you're seeing this resurgence, as we know, because one, the whole emissions thing. Two is data centers. So the increased demand for electricity, and you have data centers looking at trying to bring SMRs online, bring like with Microsoft, restart 3 Mile Island. The Army has, I think they have six 6 megawatts of power that they now have that they can do. They can do it. Can literally be put on a truck, that these SMRs can be put on a truck and can be moved when they need to. You can power a base, you can power a forward operating post. And this is not the kind of uranium that blows up. It doesn't become a bomb. But yes, every nuclear is very, very cool, and that's where the cool kids are. But I fear that Colorado is not going to be at the cool kids table.
Yeah, I think you might be right, and for a little reason of why that might be. The article, of course, while laying out sort of the backstory and the resurgence and Alex Valdez's sort of changing of his mind on nuclear and embracing it, you also, of course, get the usual suspects to come in here and just dump all over nuclear as an idea. Someone from the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, they always are anti-nuclear in every single article where they need an anti-nuclear perspective. Of course, the Sierra Club makes an appearance here and says their normal thing about, oh, nuclear is just a distraction of the things that work, and we only like wind, solar, and demand response and energy efficiency. That's what really is going to be the technology of the future. All of this is a distraction, yada, yada, yada. So you definitely still have that mindset at play in the state. And those groups like the Sierra Club, for instance, are still quite influential in setting the agenda and the policy direction of the state. But another perspective in here that I think is also worth pointing out is our governor. And, we've talked about this on the show before, where he hasn't been maybe verbally hostile to nuclear energy, and he, of course, signed the bill into law that reclassified it as clean. But he's been very hard to pin down in terms of getting him to say anything positive about nuclear. His energy office, for instance, because of a 2018 bill, was charged with doing things to promote nuclear as a source of clean energy in the state and hasn't done so. And so you've seen a lot of let's say ambivalence from the Polis administration on nuclear, if not, maybe not outright hostility or outright support, but maybe some ambivalence. But he's on the record here talking about Colorado. He says Colorado has a history as an innovator, and nuclear energy should be no different. And he says he should view nuclear energy not as a competing energy source to wind and solar, but as a complementary solution. So sort of the opposite of what folks like the Sierra Club are saying. Now, I think it's fine to say, how serious is he being in that? But there's some rhetorical value in the fact that we follow this stuff as our job. This is the first time I think I've ever seen him say something nice about nuclear energy in a news article when he's been asked about it.
Yeah, you're 100% right on that. And so if he were staying in office, but he's not.
Fair point.
But I will say this: you still have Will Tour at the CEO, Colorado Energy Office, who is flat out hostile to nuclear. He has no interest in nuclear. And what I think is funny is he says it's not yet ready for prime time. SMRs are not yet ready for prime time. And he may be right on that. I mean, they aren't ready for mass deployment, although some are using it sort of in pilot programs. The military, you have some data centers that are trying to procure some or get some built. But Will Tour saying it's not yet ready for prime time is just downright laughable when the quote technology that he is betting on to power the state of Colorado only exists in his mind. There aren't these big batteries that he seemed that Colorado will clearly need that we cited in our paper on hydrogen. The state is looking to deploy 12-hour batteries. They don't exist. They don't exist. Hydrogen doesn't exist. Wind and solar plus batteries have not powered a grid anywhere, not anywhere in the world. You can't find a state that does. You can't find a town that does it. They all have some kind of backup. So the fact that Will Tour is the one saying SMRs aren't yet ready for prime time, maybe they're not ready for prime time in his head. All because he is a guy who envisions a grid that doesn't exist. It only exists in his mind.
Yeah, like you said, we covered it in the we covered just how it may be infeasible or not ready for prime time. Some of the Energy Office's own solutions are in that report that you just mentioned there. But interesting article nonetheless. Just to, it's even
Can I
catching on.
throw one
Oh, go ahead.
Can I throw one more thing out? One of my favorite quotes, and this is again Will Tour, where he says, I can't even say this with a straight face. It's pretty clear. This is Will Tour. It's pretty clear. Wind and solar will be the workhorses of the grid, just looking at cost modeling. You can build them relatively quickly, and they're so much cheaper than other sources. Well, yeah, I suppose if you don't value human life, that if you don't put a value on that, it's there. The wind and solar being the workhorses is like saying your DeLorean is a workhorse rather than your pickup truck, and you live on a farm. They don't, they're boutique at best. They're temperamental. They're the divas of the grid. They'll come on when they feel like it. When the sun goes down, they don't want to work. I mean, if they're the workhorses of the grid, it says a lot about Will Tour's work ethic. That's all I can say.
And to your point, I guess it sort of speaks to the idea that maybe Colorado won't be, even though nuclear is having this broader resurgence, maybe Colorado won't be at least at the forefront of benefiting from that resurgence, just based on comments like that of the
No,
folks that are atop of state policy.
yeah,
But
that's what they think.
right, that's right. No, and I think it is widespread. It's a widespread view amongst those folks that set the agenda for the state, for sure. But another article we wanted to touch on comes to us from the folks over at the Gazette and Colorado Politics. It ran in both outlets, but it deals with the topic we've covered pretty thoroughly on this show here, and that's obviously the growing source of tension and frustration and anxiety in the community of Pueblo and in other coal communities as well. Over sort of we're getting close to crunch time here when these coal plants are supposed to disappear, and these communities just don't feel like they're being taken care of as they were promised. That's it's important to note that the state made affirmative promises to this community to get them on board with shuttering their lifeline, their economic lifeline, the coal plants. And it's called Energy Battle. Colorado power plant closures ignite debate over jobs, taxes, and energy future in Pueblo. So clearly, this is becoming just a story that the media cannot avoid any longer.
Right. And credit goes to Marianne Goodland for covering a story that shows the reality of the fact that energy policy in Colorado is not unanimous. And it isn't just the oil and gas industry or Weld County that is up in arms about what the trajectory of Colorado's energy policy, that the city and county of Pueblo are very upset the Western Slope. That although they're not featured in this article, but they are certainly part of that, what was supposed to be a just transition, the unjust transition, and what is happening to Pueblo. So I give her credit for covering it because it has not gotten a ton of press. And part of this was also about first of all, you realize Pueblo's losing some 800 very high paying jobs in within the city. These are union jobs, these are labor jobs, these are skilled labor jobs. You don't just go tell those people, oh, go be a solar panel installer. I mean, these these are highly skilled laborers, and just good, decent folks too. I mean, these are families. These are exactly the kind of people you want in your community. I guess unless you're in Boulder, in which case, probably don't want to sully yourself with working men and women. Um, so 800, up to 800 really high paying jobs in Comanche. This was a number that I didn't know until I read the PISAC report, which is the report that this group that Frances Cecilia, former PUC commissioner, she works with them and is often their attorney at the Public Utilities Commission when it comes to filings. It should be noted that Jared Polis did not reappoint her. I don't know exactly why, but my guess is she wasn't going to be Polis's lackey, so he was going to have no part of her. Um, but she's that PISAC report. It's over. I think it's like 875 or 876 billion, no, $1 million, almost $1 billion of tax revenue that Pueblo will lose between now and 2070. And I challenge any municipality in this state to try and make up that kind of revenue. I mean, it'd be impossible. I mean, it will devastate closing Comanche. We've already closed one. We're set to close two, and then three closes. Closing that, you literally shut down the main generator of revenue for the city and the county, and then you lose those community members. It isn't just revenue, it's the people, it's the fabric of the community as well. These are working men and women that have families, that raise their families in Pueblo. They want to stay in Pueblo. They love Pueblo. You talk to those people, they want to be there, and you are decimating the fabric of a community. And I got to tell you, so they're not putting solar panels down there is not going to make Pueblo whole. They say the only way to make them whole is with nuclear, and you could drop APR 1000 down there, and you'd have zero emissions. You have the workforce to make it run, and you wouldn't. And the transmission lines are there. They've got rail lines. They've got everything they need for large electric generation, and you could do it with nuclear, but of course we go back, refer to the article we just discussed. um, but you could make Pueblo whole and stabilize the grid in Colorado for less than what it will cost to build the grid out with wind and solar. And I think it was Eric Blank. I'll leave you to talk about Eric Blank.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
brings up a great point because of what obviously the PUC is not considering a nuclear plant at the moment to replace Comanche, and that's been a source of, I think a couple shows ago we covered the letter that the very angry letter that Pueblo County sent to the PUC saying that you didn't even consider what we requested in this report. Instead, in this so-called just transition solicitation, this electric resource plan proceeding, they've preliminarily approved about $15 billion. That's 15 billion with a B dollars worth of wind, solar, batteries, and a smidgen of natural gas. I think it's about 200 megawatts or so of natural gas peaker plants. That's supposed to be the just transition, making the communities whole while also shoring up the grid and meeting new resource demands. And like you said, PUC Chair Eric Blank, Marion Goodland, to her credit, quotes him talking about this just transition plan being, quote, the single largest resource acquisition in the history of Colorado and an over $15 billion commitment from customers. And he specifically, he is raising concerns about, quote, exorbitant rate hikes to ratepayers that will be forced to pay for this. So XL customers, so essentially the risk is XL customers get soaked paying for this, the highest rate hike for generation anyway in state history, while the community of Pueblo isn't made whole from the coal plant closure that's being taken from them. It's basically who wins? Who wins in this situation? And that's sort of the situation we find ourselves.
Wins. Let me answer that. Polis's ego. His ego wins because he gets to say he's keeping a campaign promise, even though his campaign promise is going to devastate the city and county of Pueblo and the entire state with unreliable power. And I will add this, a couple of things on this. One is that when we intervened, when Independence Institute, it was a coalition of ratepayers, of which the Independence Institute was the lead coalition member. When we intervened at the PUC, I guarantee $15 billion was not the number that was tossed around,
Right.
was not it. And not only we have to pay for stranded assets and then we have to pay for stranded assets. Just so everybody knows, I'll tell you what that means. We are paying for perfectly good generating source, Comanche 3, to be retired. Well, Marianne Goodland says 10 years ahead of time. It's more like 30 years ahead of time. And we have to pay for it, even though we don't get to use it. So that's one of those costs as well. And when we were fighting that battle and saying it makes no sense to shut down Comanche 3, no economic sense. The fight was, oh, yes, it will. Yes, it does. This is going to save ratepayers money. We threw the BS flag on that, and we were right. We were right, but even we didn't imagine a figure of $15 billion. And the fact that later on in the same article, Jared Polis has the audacity to call this market driven. Yeah, I guess if mandates and subsidies are market driven, I mean, it's a government created market. It's a government forced market.
And the fact that he says that this plan, of course, will save people money, just 3 lines after his own PUC chair says that he's desperately worried about exorbitant utility rate hikes, but it's going to save people money. Don't you worry. This market-driven transition is going to save us all money. It's going to save Pueblo money. It'll be great. I'll leave you, as we're coming up on time here, Amy, I'll leave you with the last word for some takeaways for our listeners on this story. But I think both of these speak to just the general direction that the state has gone down in terms of its energy policy and who is on the losing end of that. And it tends to be, communities like Pueblo and us, the ratepayers.
And ratepayers. And I'll add one more thing onto that before. We have another story we'll probably not get to till next week, but transmission and distribution
Oh,
alone.
yeah. Yeah.
Another 60, they say Excel it has said that transmission alone, transmission and distribution, which by the way, there's a rider on distribution on your bill. Just remember that, the Fenberg rider. Transmission and distribution over the next 20 years will be somewhere between 62 and 82 billion dollars. That's with the B, billion dollars. So that's just to deliver the power to your home, which means they haven't built a single generating source, which we know from this one alone is one proceeding is costing $15 billion, and that won't be near enough to power the state. So with that, okay, so what do you take away from this? Well, one, your bills are going up a lot. Your bills are going to go up a lot. They're already high, but they are going up even more. And this stuff will get baked in, and you will see these increases year over year. We've seen it already. It's going to continue, not for a year, not for 2 years, but probably the next 20 years. We have to pay for all of this. We have to pay for Polis's ego. So number one, your bills are going up. That's number one. Number two, hold your elected officials accountable for this. Never let them forget that they're the ones who did this. And I mean anybody who voted for this stuff at the Colorado legislature and the governor's race. And I would ask going forward as we go and get into 2026, you ask every single elected official that darkens your door what is their stance on this? And what are they going to do to try and stop it? That's the other thing. And three, get a generator. You need it for reliability. You're going to need it because you're going to have to save money somehow, some way. And the generator is a whole lot cheaper than what your XL bill is going to be, or your whatever bill because the entire state has to pay for this.
Yep, that's exactly right. You heard her, folks. That does it for us in another episode here of PowerGab. If you like what you heard this episode, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio-only shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.